There is a reason you are hearing this message right now. Not yesterday, not tomorrow, right now. And maybe you thought you were forgotten. Maybe you looked at your life and wondered, God, where are you? Maybe you prayed until you had no words left. Maybe you cried in places where nobody could hear you. Maybe you smiled around people while something inside you was breaking. But listen carefully. What if the silence was never rejection? What if the delay was never denial? What if God was waiting for this exact moment because you were not ready before? Hear this clearly. You are not standing where you are by accident. You did not survive everything you survived for nothing. The heartbreak, the betrayal, the nights you could not sleep, the friendships that suddenly disappeared, the doors that closed without explanation, the people who walked away when you needed them most, the seasons when it seemed like everyone else was moving forward while you were standing still. God saw every moment. He saw what they did when nobody else was watching. He saw the tears you wiped away before anyone noticed. He saw the prayers you whispered under your breath. He saw you holding yourself together when you felt like you were falling apart. And God is saying, I have not forgotten you. You thought you were being buried, but God was planting you. You thought you were being rejected, but God was redirecting you. You thought you were losing everything, but God was removing what could not go where He is taking you. Listen carefully. There are seasons when God becomes quiet because He is doing something too deep for you to understand. Not every blessing begins with a celebration. Some blessings begin with separation. Some miracles begin with an ending. Some breakthroughs begin when the door you desperately wanted closes in your face. And sometimes God has to remove people from your life because they were connected to the version of you that He is preparing to leave behind. You kept asking God to change your circumstances, but God was changing you. You kept asking God to give you the blessing, but God was building the person who could carry the blessing. Because elevation without preparation can destroy a person. So God took you through the wilderness. He allowed you to walk through lonely places. He allowed you to discover who you really were when nobody was clapping. And there, in the darkness, something powerful happened. You began to hear God differently. You began to recognize what was fake. You began to value peace more than attention. You began to understand that not everybody who smiles at you is a sign to your destiny. You began to understand that being alone is not always the same as being abandoned. Sometimes loneliness is where God introduces you to yourself. Sometimes isolation is where God protects you from voices that would have talked you out of your calling. Sometimes separation is mercy. Hear this clearly. The people who left may have been part of your pain, but they were not necessarily part of your purpose. Stop begging people to stay when God is giving them permission to leave. Stop chasing what God is removing. Stop trying to resurrect relationships that God allowed to die. There are doors you keep knocking on because you cannot see that God has already prepared another door. And there are people you keep mourning because you cannot yet see what their absence is making room for. God is not cruel. God is not careless. God knows the end from the beginning. And what feels like loss today may become the testimony you tell tomorrow, because there is something being formed inside you, something stronger, something deeper, something that cannot be shaken by the opinions of people. You have been wounded, but you are still standing. You have been disappointed, but you are still believing. You have been betrayed, but you did not become bitter. You have been rejected, but you did not stop praying. You have been misunderstood, but you kept walking. That is strength. That is endurance. That is faith. And God sees it. Maybe you have been asking, why did I have to go through so much? Maybe one day you will understand. Maybe you will look back at the very season that broke your heart and realize it was the season that built your backbone. The season that taught you how to pray. The season that taught you how to discern. The season that taught you how to wait. The season that taught you that God is enough. Listen carefully. Your suffering did not get the final word. Your betrayal did not get the final word. Your loneliness did not get the final word. Your past did not get the final word. God gets the final word. And if God says your story is not over, then your story is not over. There are things you cannot see yet. There are prayers being answered in ways you do not recognize. There are pieces moving behind the scenes. There are connections God is arranging. There are opportunities being prepared. There are things being removed because they cannot survive the next chapter of your life. You may not see it, but heaven is not standing still. God is not standing still, and your life is not standing still. Something is changing, something is shifting, something is breaking open, but before the breakthrough comes the transformation. Before the elevation comes the preparation. Before the public testimony comes the private battle. And perhaps that is why this season has felt so intense. You are becoming someone you have never been before. The old you could not carry what God is preparing for the new you. So God has been strengthening your spirit, teaching you patience, teaching you obedience, teaching you discernment, teaching you how to keep believing when there is no evidence. That is real faith. Faith is not only praising God when everything is going well, faith is praising Him when you are confused. Faith is trusting Him when you do not understand. Faith is saying, Lord, I still believe you, while your circumstances are screaming the opposite. And perhaps right now God is asking you for one more thing. Trust me, not your timeline, not your feelings, not the opinions of people. Trust me. Because divine timing does not operate according to human clocks. You may think you are late. God may know you are right on time. You may think you missed your opportunity. God may know the real opportunity has not even arrived. You may think everyone has passed you. God may be protecting you from a race you were never supposed to run. Stop comparing your chapter 1 to somebody else's chapter 20. Stop measuring your destiny by somebody else's calendar. God knows your appointed time. And when that time comes, what God has ordained for you will not need to be forced. You will not have to beg. You will not have to manipulate. You will not have to destroy yourself trying to prove your worth. What God sends will come with grace. What God opens will not require you to become someone you were never created to be. What God gives you will not demand that you abandon Him to keep it. Hear this clearly. There is a blessing that can only arrive after you become strong enough to receive it. And maybe God waited for this time because now you can handle what once would have overwhelmed you. Now you can recognize the difference between attention and love. Now you can recognize the difference between opportunity and distraction. Now you can recognize the difference between a connection sent by God and a connection sent to test you. You are not the same person anymore. Your eyes have opened. Your spirit has awakened. You have learned things pain could teach you that comfort never could. And that is why the next season may look different. But do not become careless. When God begins to elevate you, the battle may not disappear immediately. Sometimes spiritual warfare becomes intense when you begin walking seriously in your purpose. You may feel unusual resistance. You may suddenly feel discouraged. You may find yourself tempted to return to old habits. Old people may return. Old memories may return. Old fears may return. And you may wonder, why now? Because sometimes the enemy tries to make you question your identity right before you step into a new level of obedience. So guard your heart, guard your mind. Watch what you allow to speak into your spirit. Not every voice deserves access to you. Not every opinion deserves a response. Not every accusation deserves your attention. You do not have to fight every battle. Some battles belong to God. Pray, stay grounded, stay humble. Stay close to Scripture, stay close to Christ. And when fear says, you are alone, remember that God promised His presence. When shame says, you are disqualified, remember that God is still able to redeem. When your past says, you will always be this person, remember that God specializes in transformation. And when the enemy whispers, nothing is changing, look at who you have become. You are more discerning, more patient, more prayerful, more aware, more resilient, more dependent on God. That is change, that is preparation, that is evidence. Maybe the miracle is not only what God is about to put in your hands, maybe the miracle is who He has made you in the process. There was a version of you that could not survive what you have survived, but you did. There was a version of you that would have collapsed under the weight of this season, but God strengthened you. There was a version of you that needed everybody to understand. Now you can walk away in peace. There was a version of you that needed every door to open. Now you trust God when He closes one. There was a version of you that feared being alone. Now you understand that God's presence is greater than human approval. Do you see it? The wilderness changed you. The silence changed you. The betrayal changed you. The waiting changed you. And now God can trust you with things He could not trust you with before. Listen carefully. Your greatest season may not arrive with a loud announcement. It may begin quietly. One conversation, one opportunity, one unexpected message, one door, one idea, one moment when something inside you says, "This is different." Pay attention. Sometimes God speaks through peace. Sometimes He speaks through conviction. Sometimes He speaks through scripture. Sometimes He speaks through circumstances. Sometimes He closes a door so completely that you finally stop trying to reopen it. And sometimes He gives you a strange sense that something is coming before you can explain why. But test everything. Do not call every coincidence a prophecy. Do not call every emotion God's voice. Stay close to His word. Stay close to wisdom. Stay humble. God does not need confusion to guide you. And when the right time comes, you will not have to manufacture the miracle. You will recognize the hand of God. You will look back and say, "Now I understand why that person left. Now I understand why that door closed. Now I understand why I had to wait. Now I understand why God would not let me settle." Because sometimes God protects your destiny by disappointing you. Sometimes He protects your future by breaking your attachment to the past. And sometimes the answer to your prayer is hidden inside the thing you were crying about. Think about that. You prayed for strength, so God gave you a battle. You prayed for wisdom, so God gave you a situation that forced you to discern. You prayed for peace, so God removed what was disturbing your spirit. You prayed for purpose, so God made you uncomfortable with a life that no longer fit your calling. You prayed for deeper faith, so God allowed you to walk through a season where you had nothing but faith. And now, you are still here. That means something. You are still here. After the heartbreak, still here. After the rejection, still here. After the nights you thought you could not make it, still here. After the betrayal, still here. After the silence, still here. Do not underestimate that. The fact that you are still believing after everything you have experienced is itself a testimony. God kept you, God carried you, God sustained you, and what He carried you through was not designed to destroy you, it was preparing you. So do not give up now. Do not quit at the edge of your transformation. Do not return to what God delivered you from simply because the future feels unfamiliar. Do not run backward because forward requires faith. You have already come too far. There is something ahead of you that requires the strength you gained behind you. The pain was not wasted, the tears were not wasted, the prayers were not wasted, the waiting was not wasted. God wastes nothing surrendered to Him. Hear this clearly. The chapter that hurt you may become the chapter that introduces your greatest testimony. The person who broke your heart may become part of the story you tell about how God taught you self-worth. The season that isolated you may become the season where you discovered your purpose. The door that closed may become the reason you walked through the door God actually intended for you. And one day you may stand in a place you once prayed for and realize, God did not say no. He said, not yet. Because He knew the right time. He knew what you could handle. He knew who needed to leave. He knew what needed to grow inside you. He knew what had to die before something new could live. And God waited for this time. Not because He forgot, but because He knew. He knew this version of you would be ready. So if you are entering a new season, do not carry old chains into it. Forgive, release, Let go. You do not have to pretend that the pain did not happen. You simply have to stop allowing the pain to control your future. Give the wound to God. Give the betrayal to God. Give the unanswered questions to God. Give the person who hurt you to God. And then lift your eyes. Because there is more ahead. There is more life ahead. More purpose. More growth. More obedience. More peace. More opportunities to serve, more chances to become who God created you to be, and perhaps the blessing you have been waiting for is not only financial, it is not only success, it is not only recognition. Maybe the blessing is peace, maybe it is freedom, maybe it is restored identity, maybe it is a clean heart, maybe it is wisdom, maybe it is the courage to finally walk away, maybe it is the strength to finally begin, maybe it is the restoration of your relationship with God. Because the greatest blessing is not getting everything you want. The greatest blessing is becoming the person who knows that God is enough even before the blessing arrives. That is where your power is, not in having everything, but in knowing who holds everything. So when the next storm comes, remember, you have survived storms before. When people misunderstand you, remember, Jesus was misunderstood too. When you are rejected, remember, rejection does not cancel calling. When you are lonely, remember. Loneliness does not mean abandonment. When you are waiting, remember. Waiting does not mean God is inactive. And when you cannot see the road ahead, keep walking. One step, then another, then another. You do not need to see the entire staircase. You only need enough faith for the next step. God is not asking you to understand everything. He is asking you to trust Him. And perhaps this is the moment when your perspective changes. You stop asking, why did God allow this? And you begin asking, Lord, what are you building in me through this? You stop asking, why did they leave? And you begin asking, what are you making room for? You stop asking, when will my life begin? And you begin saying, I trust your timing. That is spiritual awakening. That is maturity. That is transformation. You are not waiting for God to become faithful. He has already been faithful. You are learning how to recognize His faithfulness. So breathe. Release the pressure. Stop trying to force tomorrow into today. The blessing has an appointed time. The breakthrough has an appointed time. The restoration has an appointed time. And your job is not to control the timing. Your job is to remain faithful, remain prayerful, remain obedient, remain humble, remain ready. Because when God opens the door, you do not want to be distracted by the door behind you. You want to be ready to walk through. And when that moment comes, you will understand. You will understand the silence. You will understand the separation. You will understand the waiting. You will understand the tears. You will understand why God would not let certain people stay. You will understand why some prayers were answered differently than you expected, and you will look back at the old version of yourself with compassion. You will say, thank you, God, for not giving me what I thought I needed. Thank you for closing that door. Thank you for protecting me. Thank you for keeping me when I could not keep myself. Thank you for waiting until the right time. Because God waited for this time. This version of you, this level of faith, this maturity, this moment, and now, you are closer than you think. Do not let one difficult day convince you that God has abandoned His promise. Do not let one closed door convince you that your future is closed. Do not let one betrayal convince you that everybody is against you. Do not let one delay convince you that God has forgotten your name. You are still being prepared. You are still being shaped, you are still being strengthened, and somewhere beyond what you can currently see, God is working. So lift your head, dry your tears, get back on your knees, open your Bible, pray again, believe again, dream again, hope again, not because life has suddenly become easy, but because God is still God. And if He brought you through the last valley, He can lead you through the next one. If He sustained you yesterday, He can sustain you tomorrow. If He kept you when you were broken, He can keep you when you are blessed. And when your blessing arrives, remember the wilderness. Remember the nights when nobody knew what you were carrying. Remember the moments when only God knew how close you were to giving up. Remember the prayers. remember the tears, and never forget who kept you alive through it all. So if this message found you in a season of waiting, do not panic. If it found you in a season of loneliness, do not lose heart. If it found you after betrayal, do not become bitter. If it found you in spiritual warfare, stand firm. If it found you at the edge of breakthrough, do not turn back. Something may be changing, something may be preparing, something may be ending, something new may be beginning. But whatever happens next, trust God, trust His timing, trust His wisdom, trust His silence, trust His process, and trust that your story is still being written. Because the God who saw you in the dark will also see you in the light. The God who met you in your tears will be there when you smile again. The God who carried you through the valley will not abandon you at the mountain, and the God who allowed you to wait knows exactly why He waited. Maybe the blessing was never late. Maybe you were being prepared for it. Maybe the delay was divine protection. Maybe the isolation was divine preparation. Maybe the heartbreak was the doorway to healing. Maybe the ending was the beginning. Maybe the wilderness was the classroom. Maybe the silence was where your faith became strong enough to hear God without needing a sign. And maybe, just maybe, this is the moment you finally understand. You were not forgotten. You were being formed. You were not rejected. You were being redirected. You were not abandoned. You were being drawn closer. You were not buried. You were being planted, and now God is calling you to rise, not in pride, not in revenge, not to prove your enemies wrong. Rise in faith. Rise in obedience. Rise in peace. Rise knowing that what God has for you does not require you to destroy yourself chasing it. Rise knowing that your worth was never determined by who stayed. Rise knowing that your identity is not defined by what happened to you. Rise knowing that your past is not stronger than God's grace. Rise knowing that your pain is not greater than God's purpose. And rise knowing that the story is not over. Listen carefully. The same person who cried in secret can one day testify in public. The same person who felt forgotten can one day become proof that God never forgets. The same person who walked through the valley can one day tell someone else, "Keep going, God is faithful." Your scars may become evidence. Your survival may become ministry. Your testimony may become somebody else's reason not to give up. So keep going, keep praying, keep believing, keep trusting, keep walking. Your season is not defined by what you see today. God sees beyond today, and if He is asking you to wait, wait with faith. If He is asking you to release, release with faith. If He is asking you to move, move with faith. If He is asking you to remain still with faith. Because divine timing is never merely about when the blessing arrives. It is about who you become while you wait. And perhaps God waited for this time because now you are ready to understand something you could not understand before. The blessing was never meant to make you important. It was meant to make you useful. The elevation was never meant to make you better than anyone. It was meant to make you better equipped to serve. The testimony was never meant to glorify the pain. It was meant to glorify the God who brought you through it. So when your breakthrough comes, give God the glory. When the door opens, give God the glory. When the healing begins, give God the glory. When peace finally returns, give God the glory. And when people ask how you made it, tell them, I did not make it by myself. God kept me. And if you believe that God is still working in your life, I want you to do something right now. Write the word chosen in the comments. Not because you are better than anybody else, not because you are perfect, but because you are choosing to believe that God has a purpose for your life. Let that word be your declaration. Chosen. Chosen to keep believing, chosen to keep walking, chosen to keep trusting, chosen to rise after falling, chosen to heal after heartbreak, chosen to forgive, chosen to grow, chosen to become everything God created you to be. And if you are still waiting for your blessing, do not lose faith. If God has not answered yet, do not assume He never will. If the door has not opened yet, do not assume there is no door. If the promise seems distant, do not assume it has disappeared. Trust His timing. Strengthen your faith. Stay close to Christ. Pray when you feel nothing, praise when you see nothing, believe when you understand nothing. And remember, God may be doing His deepest work in the places where you see the least evidence. So keep going, chosen one. Your story is not finished. Your purpose is not dead. Your future is not cancelled. Your pain is not meaningless. Your waiting is not wasted. And your God has not forgotten you. The night may have been long. The silence may have been painful. The road may have been lonely. But morning is still coming. And when it comes, you will understand why God made you wait. You will understand why He removed certain people. You will understand why some doors stayed closed. You will understand why He allowed your faith to be tested. And you will look back and whisper through tears, God was with me the whole time. So hold on. One more prayer. One more step. One more day. One more act of faith. Do not quit. Do not turn back. Do not surrender the future because the present is difficult. God is still writing, God is still shaping, God is still preparing. And if this message spoke directly to your spirit, subscribe and stay connected for more faith-filled messages that remind you of what fear wants you to forget. Strengthen your faith. Trust God's timing. And remember the word you wrote below, chosen. Because you may not understand the season you are in, but God does. You may not see what is coming, but God does. You may not know how the story ends, but God does. And that is enough. Keep your faith. Keep your heart open. Keep your eyes on Christ. Your blessing does not need to arrive according to your schedule. It only needs to arrive according to God's. And when the appointed time comes, you will realize something beautiful. God was never late. He was waiting for this time. He was preparing you for this moment. And everything you thought was the end was only the beginning.